To take the lead on this panel, we have a returning member of our summit. She's been here several times, Tchen, who is the Senior Director of Strategist of Programmatic at AARP. Hoan, welcome back.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be back. This was, an incredible experience last year, and I know for the next couple of days when we're immersed in everything programmatic, it'll be just as great. We've got an exciting topic to discuss today. So the new KPI, optimizing for the business objectives, and an awesome panel. I'll let everyone introduce themselves, starting with Bryan.
Bryan Benavides, I'm the Director of Digital Marketing for Apt Electronics. We are a high-end appliance and electronics retailer out of Chicago, our largest single-store retailer in the country.
Kevin Howard, I head up digital display and pretty much all digital channels for Ally Bank across the enterprise.
Matt Sweeney, North American CEO of Xaxis, an outcome media company.
So, it's exciting to moderate this panel because this is a topic that we could probably talk about all day. We just have half an hour. Missy had a great presentation about being player first as their business outcome that they were optimizing for. Can you tell me a little bit about how you optimize and what your business objectives are?
Of course. For us, all of our marketing and all of our objectives revolve around the customer experience. And that's what our company's been built off for the past 83 years. It's all about the experience and having a customer have a positive experience, which ultimately will have them come back. You're not going to impulse buy a brand new kitchen range or a refrigerator or a 4K TV. So depending on where you are in the sales cycle, whether you're doing your research or you're going to click to buy or during the post-purchase with the delivery, all the content and everything's revolved around what the person's looking for at that point. So a lot of the measurements and KPIs are based off of that for us.
Yeah, for us, it's really two buckets. There's the prospects and then there's the customers. On the customer side, it's very similar to you. We really have a vision of becoming a usage brand to the masses. And how do you create that stickiness? How do you create a necessity for them to come to you on a daily, if not weekly basis and check in for tools, tips, other things other than just checking their balance? For prospects, it's a little bit different, and I keyed in on a comment before around agencies being challenged to drive to the lowest common denominator. When I started Ally about 8 years ago, that's what the agency's dictate was get the CPA as low as possible and pump accounts through the system. What we found and what I really uncovered very quickly is that didn't align with what the true business outcomes were, which is deposits for the business. And if we just drive towards that lowest common denominator, what we ended up doing was driving a lot of really low balance accounts who were coming for the freebies that you get with being a bank customer. So we changed the KPIs to be more focused on true outcomes, and we created a feedback loop with the agency so that they could understand and optimize towards the deposits and types of accounts being generated versus just a CPA metric. So it moved to deposits per marketing dollar as a metric for the bank. Similar instance for Invest in our other products is really moving away from that low common denominator to a more meaningful metric that we can talk on the same level with everybody in the organization at the high level, so we're all speaking the same language.
Yeah, we moved to outcomes back in November 2016, and it was based on feedback and conversations we were having with our brand marketers. Fundamentally, things like, we're driving towards click-through rates, yet our business isn't growing. Or we've done a brand lift study, yet our business isn't growing. Basically, we're saying to folks in programmatic, but also in digital media, you guys have overpromised and underdelivered. I've now moved all these budgets over to digital and into programmatic, and the bottom line is I can't still sit at a corporate meeting and tell the CEO, CFO, COO that the investments we're making in digital media is having an impact on our business. So we undertook at that point, analysis to look at what our clients were measuring. And unfortunately, they were measuring the same old KPIs, click-through rates, visit to a website, proxies that were not leading to higher engagement levels or more sales. So we decided at that point we're going to change our business and begin working with progressive marketers to help them figure out what moves the needle for them, how do they have better engagements that lead to revenue. And that's what we've been doing with brands over the last couple of years.
Great, thank you. And internally, or for your clients, how do you prioritize and communicate these new objectives throughout the organization?
Well, I mean, it all depends on sort of what assets they have and access to data. EA is going to have access to data, so would Ally Bank and AARP and your business as well, Bryan. But we work with a lot of big brands and CPG companies that are sold through distribution that don't have that same benefit or access. So the first thing we do is we do a data audit. What do they have access to? What's in their CRM, their website visitors? And then we take a look at the media data, and we try to pull that all together, the offline and online data, and give them, ideas about what's missing. And then, of course, we try to deconstruct successful digital engagements and use machine learning and AI to then find people that look like those folks that are most likely to become customers. We use a technology we've developed called Copilot.
Great. Kevin?
Yeah, organizational buy-in really starts at the top. You got to have those frank conversations. I think that the positive example I mentioned was one where we actually were being dictated by the business as a cost center to, hey, drive as much low-cost accounts as possible. But when you get in a room and you actually really dig under the hood and realize, hey, it's more about balances and it's more about this type of customer, the conversation and the KPIs change. We saw that recently with Invest, which is a company we acquired about 3 years ago, and their legacy management was all around, hey, let's get as low-cost accounts as possible. And it was a similar situation where when you get in a room and you have a conversation, you realize that, hey, I would pay a lot more for an options trader, or I'd pay a lot more for a day trader, or I'd pay a lot more for someone who brings a big balance into their invest account. So the KPI shift and becomes more of a scoring system based upon real metrics versus just a false vanity metric of CPA.
Just to piggyback what these guys are saying too, it's about the education and what we have. So I work for a traditional organization that's family owned. So when I run the P&L for all digital channels and they're going, you're spending how much sales are you getting? So that's the way the C-level and the presidents look at it. So it's my job to educate everybody. And looking at the data, looking at the KPIs, looking at top funnel, bottom funnel, and what we're ultimately getting to show value at the marketing channel. So I know we'll get into it, but attribution's a huge part of my overall strategy.
Yeah, thank you. And what kind of changes have you seen with this type of shift and the impact on your programmatic, media?
For myself, when I took it over 5 years ago, it was last click, and that was the final rule. So trying to evolve and again change and educating and showing that we need to look at more than that. We need to look at first touch, last touch, linear, the multi-touch, who's bringing in new traffic, what's that new traffic doing, who's converting, who's not, who's looking at buying guides, who's going straight to product page. So all that is very important for the overall strategy and where we're investing the right dollars. And I'm a firm believer that using our first-party data is what's making us smarter than our competitors out there to do the lookalike modeling, to then do the affinities to all the brands that we hold. And all that adds up and has been working so far for us.
Great. Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely about breaking down silos. We have quickly grown over the past 10 years since we were conceived, from being just a monoline bank to having investment products, credit cards, mortgage products. And for a long time, a lot of those businesses were siloed, and they all had their individual KPIs, their individual budgets. But at the enterprise level, when you start thinking about a customer and the relationship with Ally there and all the products that we touch, the KPIs begin to change, and you begin to break down silos to think about the lifetime value of the customer across the enterprise and how do you increase that value. So it's really breaking down silos. It's getting everyone on the same page, and a lot of times it's bringing in change agents. We actually had to hire in a lot of digital and tech talent from outside of the financial world who understood the concepts that we were going with and what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, as our clients, they break down silos, they educate their organization, they bring in new talent, we begin to have more strategic conversations that are always led with data and analytics. So, we see that happening. I think that's a big change, a dramatic change that organizations are understanding that their first-party data, that they've got to own and control that first-party data and then figure out how to leverage it. The other thing that we're seeing, of course, is some of the cross-channel work that's being done. I mean, you're lucky if you're managing everything in-house or you have access to some of the search and social as well. But managing marketing budgets holistically across all these different channels and then optimizing in real time the channels that you can optimize in real time.
Great. And, you know, Kevin, you mentioned silos, and I think we hear that a lot. You know, how do you align those silos, and what are some of the challenges you've faced? I know that you all have been kind of through this process, and it's taken years to try to align the organizations for your clients or internally. You know, what are some of the challenges that you've kind of hit?
I guess I'll start because I heard my name. No, that was a big challenge. I think the big shift that happened was about 4 years ago with our new CEO who came in on board, and really marketing transformed from being a call center to being really a center of excellence. And we had a seat at the table with the businesses, and the conversation changed then. And I think as the conversations continued on and we start looking at the ecosystem and how it all comes together, and it gets back to the talent equation, it's like, do we have the right people at the table? And then there's a frank conversation around, we probably don't, and who do we need to hire to have these right conversations? And that's what's been happening the past 3 years.
Brian?
For us, the silo is in-store versus online. Our brick and mortar has dominated the Chicagoland area for 83 years, and being able to expand that and using the data that we see from our in-store shoppers versus our e-commerce shopper in New York or California, and being able to use all that data and being able to combine them and have the single customer profile for all of our marketing needs. That's kind of been our hurdle.
And look, there's silos within agencies, different planning teams sitting apart, not developing a coordinated strategy for a client. That stuff has been, and it continues to be broken down at Group M and Group M agencies. But then you also have, you know, like you guys with Ally Bank, you have a creative agency that's outside of the family, and we need to and are continuing to figure out how do we work in an integrated way with folks that are not necessarily part of the same holding company and do what's right for the customer. And we're doing a lot of that work right now with Ally Bank and others, where our dynamic creative team, our Ad Labs team, is working with RGA and trying to deliver, optimized, personalized media for Ally Banks that can drive, larger online savings accounts.
Great. Bryan, you had mentioned, merging offline and online data. What were some of the tools that you used, and what does your tech stack look like?
Well, first it started with communication. Being able to have a seat at the table with the finance team as well as the CIO, the president. Everyone has a say, and we've been working very well together to overcome this. And I think we've definitely overcome the hurdle that I mentioned before, and being able to look at what we have in-house with the data audit doing ourselves, being able to do some merging, simple rules. It's just, I wouldn't say using tools, but at first it's starting the communication. And sometimes it's harder with larger organizations and getting the right people to buy in terms of that mentality and what we need to do, because finance might have one mentality versus marketing versus IT. So I'm lucky enough to work with a great team that we're able to do that together.
Kevin?
I think we've got basically all the technology that most people have. I mean, DMP is critical as kind of a starting point, but that's just the beginning. I think where we're going is reformatting all of our web properties, all of our mobile apps to truly be dynamic on a platform that you can automatically do personalization for a certain customer or prospect based upon data that you have. And then it's really taking our data lake and taking it to the next level in terms of creating a customer interaction hub based upon not only the interactions you have with them, but also interactions they have with us through chat or through call center or through other things that we can't track linearly through a click or through a tag. Bringing that all into one place where we can actually have meaningful conversations based upon what we know about them, and really using that personalization layer across our web properties to serve up the right stuff.
Did it take a while to get all that set up? And
still setting up. It's a beast. I mean, it's a 2-year project.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I just say that we buy in, I think, 8 platforms now. It's very sophisticated and difficult, especially given all the walled gardens, all the different data sets. We have a benefit at Xaxis that every data tech and media company comes into our offices and pitches us. And we've been doing this for quite a while, been around since 2011, and over time, with experience, we've become really cynical and jaded, simply because every data company we meet with says they have something unique and advantageous. Same thing with every tech company and every media company. And the reality is most of them don't, but we do have incredible peripheral vision. We do test and learn all the time. there are new emerging DSPs that have open APIs where we can leverage our Copilot technology to deliver better predictions and do better bidding strategies with machine learning, processing huge amounts of data. And so, one of the things we do is we almost act like a value-added reseller for a lot of our partners. Like, let us do the due diligence. We've got a POV on most of these companies in the space. We're happy to share it with you. And oh, by the way, if you want to bring it in-house, we'll even help you with that. We do know how difficult it is, though.
Definitely. And Bryan, you alluded to this a little earlier. How does attribution come into play with all of this?
Attribution's a huge driver of where we're investing our budgets in, whether it being search, social, email, programmatic, OTT. We're trying to get into a little bit more call center. It's a huge part of our business as well too. Attribution helps me paint the picture across all levels, saying why are you investing here? What are you doing with that budget? Why are you moving this? Or what are you doing for Whirlpool there? What are you doing for Bosch here? So working with the brands, working with the co-op budgets, working with the family, the channel owners, helping them measure, and working with the analytics team. And I'm a true believer that the data should be trusted by the channel owners and help us make the business decisions. So again, attribution and having the right partner and the right attribution company to help you do this is key. I've gone through multiple evaluations. Actually had an attribution company last year, did great, they pivoted, I went to another one, more boutique, understands who Apt is, what we're looking for, able to customize the KPIs, the reporting that we need, whether it's being, again, finance or marketing or IT, but attribution's huge, and sometimes it's harder for other organizations, but I'm a big fan of what we're getting and the output of it.
Great. And Kevin, you mentioned, using last click and moving away from that. What was that process like?
I think it was pretty simple. I think if you look at last click, you get into that trap of going towards the lowest common denominator and heavying up on places where you shouldn't. And I think we were seeing that. And I think, just some basic attribution light, working with the agencies just to understand multi-touch from that standpoint, opened up eyes that there is value higher up in the chain. So A, it wasn't a hard sell. I think B is we're only digital. We don't have branches, so it's critical that we truly have tracking across our ecosystem, and specifically because more and more of our traffic coming to our site is mobile. It's probably over 50%, and social and some of these other channels are becoming bigger pieces of the pie. You got to be able to break down those those walled gardens and those blind spots to tell that story, and again, breaking down silos as well. Having that conversation with my invest partner that, hey, maybe I didn't drive the best account for invest, but look over here, we drove $1 billion in deposits for the bank. So at an enterprise level, we're still doing great.
Sure, great. And what about for your clients?
It's funny, 3 or 4 years ago, I said this is going to be the year of attribution, and then viewability became the key topic in the industry. And I said, well, it's going to be next year. It's going to be the year of attribution. Then it became about brand safety. I think this is going to be the year of attribution, and I may be saying this for a few more years. The reality is, it's hard. Attribution is very, very hard to do. Even when you're isolating media buying on a platform like Amazon, where you actually can see we built an audience, we delivered a message. Within 48 hours, they bought the product. Saying you spent $500,000 this month and you generated $6.3 million in sales, and being able to stand in front of the CMO and say, we did that for you. And the reality is, the brand I'm talking about, just like the brands on the dais here, you also do other marketing activities. And TV is still important for a lot of the brands that we work with. So I think we've overreached a little bit sometimes with digital, and we've got to be a little bit sort of, the last click thing I'm glad is going away, but we need new technologies and tools to really be able to sort of measure attribution correctly.
Agreed. I think just as important with attribution is the aspect of incrementality. We're hearing that more and more. How are you guys using that to gauge your business outcomes?
For us, I said this on our call, is I trust the data, and I'll say that again. I allow the channel owners to make the decisions with their technology partners, with their agencies, but we ultimately try to do best practices. We're always trying to be competitive. We always want to have the best customer experience as possible, but we trust the data. If something's not working, we've tested it, optimized, tested again, but we're always trying to innovate and try to be nimble.
Yeah, I think from a banking standpoint, we face the fun task of model governance that we have to go through. It's a big deal. And we work closely with our agency partners and their analytics teams, as well as our internal analytics teams, to come up with KPIs that make sense outside of just what we can track. A lot of advanced media mix modeling, a lot of metrics that are bespoken to us, so looking at things like likability, shares, PR, intangible things, and their direct correlation with site traffic and ultimately account openings. It's gotten pretty sophisticated in terms of seeing what would happen with a baseline without marketing and what marketing's adding in terms of incrementality.
And we have technology that we developed called M-Insights, where we can actually do lift curve analysis in terms of reaching incremental audiences and the cost to reach those audiences, which then we, of course, work with our marketing partners and agencies with. So, bidding strategies will be developed based on that lift curve analysis.
Great. You mentioned internal tools. Were there any external tools you guys are using that are out of the box or for incrementality measurement?
For us, no.
No, but I'm sure there's someone in the crowd that's going to talk to me about that.
Great. So we have a few minutes before we open up the floor for questions. I'm curious, for organizations that are looking to make this shift, what are some recommendations that you would provide if they were to start or if they're in the middle of this process, Bryan?
For us, like I said earlier, it's communication. Making sure that the programmatic team is not just have this philosophy or this strategy and the search team doesn't, or the social team or the brand team. It's being able to, and again, it's sometimes difficult in larger organizations to come up with an overall strategy and use the data together. And I think the data audit's a great first step to understand what you have and then find out what you need. And that might not necessarily mean put all your eggs in one basket with one agency or one technology partner. Sorry if I offended any agencies out there. But finding the right audience tool for us, finding the right DSP partner for us, finding the right bid optimization platform for us. We try to pick the best of the best for apps. So that's what we try to do.
Thanks. Kevin?
Yeah, I would say it's really comes down to that data audit and the analytics is a key question. And I think you have to ask yourself, based upon what you hear in your earnings reports if you're public, or what your management's saying in terms of success versus not success, does it ladder up to what you're optimizing? If it's not, you got to do some hunting. You got to figure out, is there data there that you can use to inform your KPIs and make it a better outcome for the business? And then you got to get the analytics teams on board with that, because most of the analytics teams that are in-house are very trusted across the board and up and down the chain. If you can get buy-in from them, we can take that to the business leaders and get buy-in there.
Just on our side, I mean, you guys have talked about it, but it really is about alignment, and then it's about smart people that collaborate and identifying who those folks are across any organization, whether it's client side or even just working within an agency. Like, find the people, the smart people that collaborate, that are thinking about how do we win on behalf of the client.
Yeah, thank you. I think those are all very valid points, and I think everybody has really wonderful tool sets, but without the collaboration, those tools are kind of a little useless, so to speak. Well, thank you so much. I think we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, we will. Questions of the panel, right back here.
Yeah. Brooke Abney, I'm with Omnicom Media Group. So especially when you're trying to tie back to business objectives, typically we have to run in very measurable environments. How do you balance, innovation and being in like OTT environments or app-based environments where maybe that measurability isn't there yet?
You want to take it?
The OTT example is very new to us as well too, but just like EA, we're moving some of our broadcasting budget over to that. But we feel like the data and the measurable there isn't quite what we're looking for, specifically because of the local aspect of our broadcast ads versus national. But telling the story, sometimes the C-level doesn't even want to hear it, even with the numbers that make sense. It's why'd you spend X to only make Y? So sometimes it's a hard conversation. Sometimes you got to get a little frustrated, but as long as you keep showing the growth, the incrementality, the lift curves, it's the best option you have right now.
Yeah, I'll answer it a different way. I think for some of those channels, they aren't as robust in terms of measurement as we had hoped. I mean, it's a conversation we have a lot with our partners here in terms of how do we get more granular in terms of what we're seeing from that environment. I think it really falls into what's the strategy there. And for us, OTT and connected TV and advanced TV and all the things that are coming out is more upper funnel, upper mid funnel, and building that perception and that brand mystique versus trying to drive a hardcore conversion. So some of those KPIs I mentioned that we look at outside of just what's the, if for every dollar spent, what do I get in return? It's looking at talkability, looking at how many people saw that and came and engaged with the site. So it's softer metrics, but it's an indication that we're on the right track.
Great, thanks. Do you have anything to add, Matt?
I mean, every client wants efficient media, effective media, and they want innovation. And so having those kind of conversations about what's real or what's, sort of planned, in the future is really what it all comes down to. But yeah, you want it efficient, you want it effective, and you want to do something that's innovative. We're developing tools internally within Group M that allow you to sort of put your TV plan into a system and then find how much incremental lift you can find beyond that for people that are either cord nevers or people are more likely to sort of engage with apps. So.
Yeah, I would just say that's a good point. I think we've definitely broken down who we're going after in terms of segments, and that's the other way to look at it is we definitely think millennials are a big piece of the puzzle for us, and it's definitely a KPI we look at in terms of how do we move that needle and get them to engage with our brand for the long term. And you start doing media mixes and journey modeling for each of those different audiences, and you realize there's different channels that are going to talk to each of those audiences. And those cord nevers and those cord cutters, that's a key strategy for that audience because you're not going to get them in our linear buy.
It's Nick from Swell Shark again. Question for you guys. So the idea of business objectives and optimizing towards business objectives takes patience, right? And digital and programmatic has eroded everyone's patience. People are like, I can optimize an audience in 2 days or 2 weeks. You can't really measure that as against business outcomes. So what have been the successful strategies you found within the organization to build a little patience, to think about long-term measurement and planning for true business outcomes versus just immediate, action?
I'll tell you, we work with a large auto company that's got pretty sophisticated analytics tools in a large part of their organization. And what they've developed an analysis that says, the bottom line is 99.9% of all cars are sold by dealerships. And so their dealers want people to come into the local dealer. So they know, basically, with their digital media spend, if someone comes to a website, whether it's their .com or the dealer's.com, and engages on 3 or 4 different things, that there's a higher likelihood that that person will show up into a dealership within 7 days. They call it a purchase intent score. Do they come to the site? Do they look for car availability? Do they look for financing? Do they have a trade-in? All of those things. Do they locate a dealer? They've created the analysis. They've shared that data with us, and then we've used their media spend and the data associated with that to run it through Copilot, our AI technology, and say, let's identify people that are more likely to do these 2 or 3 things. It is not perfect, but it is a lot better than what they were measuring 2 or 3 years ago. And we're now talking to them about how do you take those PI scores with footfall traffic to see if those people actually did come into a store and buy a car. So it's part of a journey. We're getting closer. It's a lot better than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And they're much more interesting conversations to have with clients.
Yeah, I'll answer it a certain way. So for any given month, let's just say our deposits goal is X, and we go into these weekly meetings and say, hey, how are we tracking towards those deposit goals? I mean, that's not going to go away. I think how do we accomplish that changes, and I think it's not all we get the leeway of choosing how do we get there, and it's a lot of which audiences we want to go after and how do we want to make that happen. We may find that we get a lot better conversion rates but lower balances from a millennial audience versus a high balance boomer audience, but you got to play that balancing act. And then also I'd say that we started to break down the journeys, and I think it's more about where that person is in the journey and what we want to say to them. I think to his point, we're working a lot with these guys on breaking down the different segments we want to go after and thinking about using Copilot to go above and beyond just third-party data and getting in front of those audiences before they're ready to pull the trigger. So example would be someone who we model against our mortgage audience, and then we see a high propensity of people who open a mortgage. 3 months before that, they buy an engagement ring. So you start to think about different ways to use data to get in front of those audiences sooner. It's no different from I guess the lack of, not the most sophisticated way of tracking TV, but at the end of the day, if you get in that consideration set and you get higher into that funnel, ultimately you're going to see the benefits down the road as they become customers. And we've seen it. I mean, we're having some of the best quarters we've had with our new agency lineup over the past 6-12 months, and it keeps on the right trajectory. So fingers crossed, we stay on that path.
Hi, Brian Stone from Beeswax. One thing we've seen with in-housing across the market is the benefit of having data science and marketing working closer for programmatic. So how, I guess, Kevin and Bryan specifically, I mean, Kevin, you were talking about your data lake and, developing that. How has that journey been, kind of getting those two groups closer, and how have you seen benefits from that?
When you say the two groups, you mean the agency and our teams?
Agency and your teams, or even marketing within your organization and your data science teams?
I think, again, that goes back to the talent we've hired and the mindset that's changed. The people we've brought in come from big tech companies who have done this before. So they know that marketing is a key part of that equation. So it's not a please can I be a part of the meeting. It's like you need to come to this meeting and make sure we're connecting the dots and everything's in sync. In terms of the agency, we were just talking about this last night. I think we're very collaborative with them, and we open doors for them so they can have the right conversations with the right people within the organization. And quite frankly, it was one of the things that when we were looking for new agencies, did they have the technical chops and did they have the right data folks to have those conversations and have a seat at the table?
And for us, the conversations internally to clean the data and to get that single customer profile was a huge win in-house. But then that allows the marketing team to then take that data and insert it into the right tools. Because your output's only going to be as good as what you put into it. So if you're putting junk in, you're going to get junk out. Everyone's heard that. But for us, then that allowed the marketing team and the analytics team to then create the audiences and create the segmentation and go after the customer and look at the affinity that if someone bought the TV, they're also going to buy a KitchenAid mixer or a mattress. Being able to look at that around the wide variety of the 250 brands that we carry is huge for us, and in terms of our audience and investing in programmatic and other channels, that's a big win.
Just one thing about data science and engineers in-house versus within a technology company. They're really hard to find, these folks, and more importantly, they're hard to keep happy within an organization. They love working on a wide variety of problems to solve for marketers across a bunch of different categories. So, if you are a company with a lot of first-party data where you can leverage this and you can identify those kind of people to bring them in-house and keep them engaged and happy over a long period of time, absolutely do it. It's a difficult thing to do, though. It is absolutely really, really hard. The benefits of them working across a bunch of different categories, solving problems for different customer sets, those benefits are aggregated and we bring them to bear for all of our clients.
Yeah, Jim Tricarico with Cadent. So my question is to you guys in general about procurement. How much do they stifle your ability to really experiment into advanced data, addressable, and all those other platforms?
I'm smiling, but it's a painful smile. So procurement's got a difficult job, right? So the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that they have got a job within all the organizations that we deal with. The key to dealing with procurement is delivering such clear, quantifiable value to the marketing client that the marketing client can push back on procurement when they're saying, you know, we don't want to pay for this, or yeah, your data science team, the benefits of data science are not there for us. So that's the best way to go about it for us. It just make the benefits and the outcomes that we're delivering for them so clear that procurement doesn't have as loud a voice in the room.
You just spoiled my lunch. No, it is tough. We don't necessarily have issues or pushback from procurement on what we're proposing. It's more around the data. It's more around the protection, the privacy, the risk, and that's kind of a sister part of procurement, which is that whole risk and compliance piece of the puzzle. That's usually the stick in the mud in terms of making sure that we get our ducks in a row in terms of how we're going to protect data. And that's what extends the process of what should take a week to sign a contract turns into 3 months.
I'll also say we just had our largest client's procurement team come visit our 3 World Trade Center office and did an immersion day with them where they sat with our data science team and engineering team, our dynamic creative team, our folks that do the first-party data audits and the consulting there. And then we took them out to dinner, but they had, you know, the reality was it was a time well spent for us and for them.
Juan, panel, thanks very much. That was great stuff. We're going to continue it.